This is not a YouTube poop video or a fan game. It is, in fact, official licensed Nintendo contraband found on the GBA. The Game Boy Advance was home to many bona fide classics, like Game You Couldn't See, really lame tribal tattoos, and of course also tons of other actually really good games, like Golden Sun, the Mario RPGs, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, Tic Tacs, the DBZ games, Super Circuit, Aria of Sorrow, the Sonic Advances, Advanced Wars, WarioWare's Weird Shit, and many other cool little classics. However, those don't really represent what most of the library was like, was it? See, the GBA was kind of a weird bit of tech, and I'm not just talking about the display that functioned more like a darkened mirror straight into the soul than an actual screen either. More so that the GBA was like a mixture of a good 3 whole generations of video games in one small package. Take the sound chip for instance. It had a legacy channel, i.e. things that can produce 8-bit waves much like the OG Game Boy, but also a type of sampler that allowed composers to drag in sounds from wherever to use for their MIDI compositions. But, of course, space would be limited, and so you ended up with music that has like strings sampled from a fancy Roland synth, but bass lines produced by a bumpin' and dumpin' 8-bit brute. Then there was also the speaker, the shitty, tinny, noisy, almost high-frequency speaker for which the music had to be mixed in rather strange ways to be made optimally audible. And then alongside that, its sample capabilities also weren't very high, unlike, say, the NES was before, resulting in music that sounded both like whatever the modern trends were at the time, 8-bit chiptunes, sample pack drag and drops, and dumpy Super Nintendo music. Now, as you can see here as well, a similar mixed-gen vibe was applied to the visuals, as GBA graphics would mostly be 2D, being that it wasn't the most powerful system, but pixel art is hard to do and expensive, and we did just have that whole pre-render phase a few years ago on the PS1, so sure, let's do that. Let's use really compressed bitmaps and tilesets based off of quickly made janky renders, but also let's fuck up the coloring and contrasts because of the darkened screen, and also the game is multi-plat, so we don't have to make CG from scratch neither. Let's just take screenshots of the models that we made for the PC and PS2 games and yeah, this'll look just fine. And it did mostly, like how Tekken Advance is just a bunch of compressed images from Tekken Tag, but it's certainly a vibe all its own, which can be said about how many of the games played as well. Isometric angles that jived better with the renders, technically made for 3D environments, but would make games control funky, and also 2 face buttons and the stubby D-pad, so yeah, why not have A double up as a menu button, or put all the combos under just one button, it's fine. And of course, due to the nature of it being a portable system, there'd also be tons more old-school arcadey experiences, lots of platformers, simple little racers, shooters, and otherwise side-scrolly games. But then again, we are also in the thick of the ambitious PS2 era, and we do kinda like that. We do want to abolish lives and include long tutorials and write epic, big stories that, well, we'll just use the same images technique that we did for the graphics in general and just put some text under it, and we'll figure out later if this meshes well with the arcadey stuff or not. Remember when Pirates of the Caribbean came out based on a ride called Spyro of the Caribbean and it was good? You did it, didn't you? A good job. You made a good fucking movie for once. But then, because capitalism, they went yo, what other rides we got? Haunted Mansion? Haunted Mansion, sure, that's the movie. Put Eddie Murphy, Donkey, Shrek, he's popular, put him in it. And then it came out and it was bad, and then someone made a GBA game. Yeah, so this is that exact shit. You got sprites that aren't drawn, but just really grossly compressed PNGs of trees in a 3D-ish world, which seems sorta high effort, until you realize that the actual story presentation is just fucking text. Yeah, So, in summary, in short, to round it off, to lead into, the GBA essentially ended up being a host for some weird, stanky-ass homunculi games, combining aesthetics, sounds, and design standards from across about 3 different generations of gaming that were never meant to be mixed together, all done with varying levels of budget, time, and technical competence as a product of either, thus resulting in this. But also this. So tonally, visually, and musically, this game is nothing like the PS1 or even later released Spyro games. No pastels, cool gradient skyboxes, no funky as fuck prog-influenced breakbeats by way of Stu Copeland, and no crazy tempo-like structures dotting the horizon, mainly because there is no horizon. But considering that this game is about Spyro being violently teleported to another realm, all of this actually fits. Big bold colors, slightly off-kilter music, everything looking like it's been built out of a scraped-together toy box and a slightly claustrophobic camera cause GBA, it all goes towards making a game that feels appropriately alien. And gameplay-wise, they do actually translate the Spyro formula pretty well. It has its moveset, enemies return because we might as well just scan in those models as PNGs. You collect gems, get butterfly, and just sort of satisfyingly plow about the place, flaming and headbutting everything in sight, with the same great sound effects and the same exploratory levels with the odd friendly folks dotted around to liven up the place. Does control a bit wonk due to the perspective. Going in a straight line ain't always as easy, especially with how stubby the GBA's D-pad was, and also the camera rocks back and forth a lot to compensate for the zoom-in speed, and the Spyro PS1 games had no shortage of motion sickness triggering camera whipping, so it's not faithful, but it's definitely a bit more extreme here, and I can see this game being straight up unplayable to some. Still, it is a cute little adventure. Rather than portals everywhere, the worlds are interconnected, with you going on little boat rides and traveling what seem to be like long distances, and eating items for certain areas like a way to light up the caves. I do quite like this game for what it is. Oh my god, it's Kula World from the hit game Glove. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have Crash Bandicoot, also a PS1 mascot who, unlike Spyro, played more like a 2D platformer in 3D than a 3D platformer, and so they just made a 2D platformer. Copy-pasted all of the assets, added some much-needed tricky depth perception by slightly slanting all the level geometry, making certain edges hard to define, which is fucking great. And otherwise, pretty much one-to-oneing this bitch, even aping the music pretty faithfully by also just reusing all of the instruments and whole mini bits like it ain't shit. It's really stunningly blatant, but I can't say that it don't work. Plays a lot like a smorgasbord of highlights from Crash 1, 2, and 3. A sort of best-of that's better off being called a we tried our best off to be a best-of and we're off to just being pretty okay good. Does have like the laziest cutscenes ever though, even by GBA standards, as they just straight up took screenshots from Crash 3's opening cutscene and put text under it pretending like shit was happening that wasn't. But even with all of the reuse otherwise, I do totes have to commend the game feel and general level design. Shit just flows well and feels good, just as the games it's crimping from did, and that ain't as easy to recreate as simply scanning in some models, so good job. Of course, now that both of these motherfuckers were under the same roof, a pretty big dick move would be to do an epic crossover, taking the best off of the best off and the best off of the offshoot to make a best off of the best off of both worlds. You could have big exploratory levels as Spyro, and cool DKC-esque platforming challenges as Crash, and have epic funny moments as the casts of both games interact with each other and fun fuck shit like, I don't know, have the goat ride the boar and see Crash trying to feed butterflies to Aku Aku or some shit. You got all the possibilities, and instead they made a really iffy minigame collection. Yeah. So, at its core, it uses the same controls as Crash, but only for the overworld. This goes for Spyro 2 only because I guess they couldn't just copy-paste shit from his game, even though they totally could have had they just made it isometric. His overworlds are more noticeably dumpy, and he also controls like shit. With every stage you enter, you get a minigame. These range from really slow, stiff, and tedious shmups and shitty breakouts to rocket blasting sheep, which is actually pretty fun, or that one helicopter flash game. What's interesting, though, is that while Spyro had skateboard and those hoop levels, they clearly had infinitely less to draw from for his stuff, as Crash's minigames are at least things he once did or would do, and almost automatically fare better as a result. Crash would drive a tiny jeep. Spyro just wants to put on his shades and chill, which is why his minigames feel like they never end and suck. This also resonates further, as in that Crash's levels and vibes and music fit and are consistent with the huge adventure, but Spyro's are just off, and this time not in a cool way. But in a way that felt like they didn't quite know how to recreate things or simply didn't have enough time or fucks to give. Not that these were made by just one team. Both the GBA Crash team and the GBA Spyro team mapped out the whole thing together, but I also know that both prior mentioned games got some sequels and spin-offs, and there's the Crash kart racing games, and yeah, honestly, they were probably just like mass producing these at this point, forced or otherwise. Even if the Crash one is mostly okay though, there's still an undeniable cynicism to be felt here, as this is clearly not the epic crossover that could have been. Defo almost tries to be from a story POV, I suppose. There's some neat little needities, like seeing money bags in the racially insensitive Islander attire, and Spyro has that bumper cart from Crash Bash. You know the one, right? Yeah. However, this is also where the GBA stank really comes in. Like, there's just something about these two renders, clearly made for very different promotional purposes back in the day, just being put together is incredibly fucking funny. These are textbook GBA cutscenes right here. Even Crash Nitro Kart's intro ain't got shit on this. It's great. Especially Spyro's side looks fucking cursed. The goddamn cunter over here has seen some fucking shit, and the title screen, Spyro's soulless gaze, is something to behold too. Honestly, all of this just makes me wonder what type of other exciting skunk game adventures the remaining platformer mascots that were left out of this epic team-up were up to. Whoa. Well, there's the Sonic 1 port. Woo! It's Sonic, but zoomed in, and with rampant speed-ups and slowdowns. And then I'm not just talking about the FPS neither, and not just speeding up to the speed it should be. No, it's just the whole physics of it. The game's constantly pushing and pulling at you, and it ramps up and crumbles seemingly wholly randomly at any point, making it almost playable. Very cool, Sega. And then of course there's the goddamn mother heckin' dag nabbin' fuck babbin' skirt dabbin' Sonic Advance games, which are legit pretty great. Level design can have a few too many def drops, but overall these shits work really well as slightly edgier, faster paced action-packed sequels to the OG Sonics. Baby straight up Naruto running and sliding and corkscrewing, and the music is all pumped up and shit. The whole level designs too are built solely for speed, with really well placed ramps and slides and bouncies, being easier but also not as troll-like as the other 2D Nicks. It's fast as fuck and super exhilarating to play because it's Zeitgeist Sonic. Sonic Adventure 2 energy, but in 2D. I quite dig it. Obviously, though, that Sonic Adventure 2 did have a subtitle that I never quite knew why it was there, but I wager someone at Sega figured that the Adventure and 2 needed to be dropped from that title, which resulted in Sonic Battle. Not the first Sonic fighting game, and probably not the last either, but definitely a Sonic fighting game that, unlike the advanced titles, is chock full of that spicy, creamy, gooey Sonic the Hedgehog storytelling. So, Eggman is out here beating up his robot child. I guess. When Sonic up and befriends the dude and then the guy with the guns and the booby bat show up to unleash some fetishes within whatever unsuspecting souls who played this growing up. If this is your plan to get a date, you'll still need to wait in line. Well, there's quite a line. Shadow? Dr. Eck? Oh no. And even my boss are interested in... Wait. Eggman isn't her boss? No, wait. Who? She works for the president? From which many hijinks and battles commence. Also, people being called daddy, because, yeah, this game is weirdly horny and I don't quite know why. Not super sure on these guitar shred samples either. They're just that smidge not in tune, but in that I also sort of respect it, I think. Anyway, battle. It's pretty much all the game is, interspersed with a bucket load of cutscenes. It's essentially an arena fighter. Little 3D areas that are quite impressive for what they are on the GBA. Various Sonic sprites duking it out somewhat awkwardly as perspectives go fuck, and aligning oneself properly with flat people in a non-flat space can really suck. But it's got cool move for days, just the one, and a decently beefy feel to it. It's just fun to juggle motherfuckers or slam right into them, and the chaos of it all when there's enough folks on screen is entertaining too. Much like Sonic Advance 2, it is very much 100% at all times. Like, this is the goddamn town song, okay? It's not a bad track, like, don't get me wrong, but when you're in that town for over an hour while you're also hearing this, cutting through your ears, it goes from like okay to DMC orb emoji, when the only breaks from it you get are this. Again, it's not awful. I kind of like how stanky it is, in fact, but when it's there constantly, it's just too much. So the Holly Summit song comes. But yeah, the game has this weird unrelentingness to it that makes it feel as if events are over before you know it, while also feeling as if nothing ever ends. It's a very simple game at its core, as I've said, dialogue, battle, but when you do that in quick enough succession while reusing a lot of songs and backdrops and blasting through plot points like they ain't shit, with the music and tech sound effects just skunging at full force and face, it simply becomes too hard to bear. It's definitely not a terrible game though. I fuck with many of the individual parts, they just don't come together very well. Because, I mean, that 100 approach works for something like Sonic Advance 2 or Sonic Adventure 2, due to them largely being very fun games. So when Sonic goes, wow, you go, wow, but when only the game goes, wow, and you ain't really feeling it, and it's just like awkwardly staring at you in disbelief, only to go, wow, again, then the wow stops being an invitation to good times and instead just becomes a facade pretending that things are cooler than they really are. Again, there's dope shit in here for sure, especially from a story point of view, but tried as I mighted, I could not get into it, for the game began to give me a migraine. See you later, Mama Rouge. And finally, there's Rayman. Trust me, I made sure to check if there was any Gek to be found in GBA land, but sadly, this video can't be quite that blessed, I fear. I'll find a reason to talk about Geks at some point, though. Don't you doubt me! Anyway, Raychild. Dude has quite a lot of GBA games, actually. There's a Rayman Xi Jinping crossover game that has some strong dandy energy. Reminds me of this equally cursed Sonic and Garfield package, which... just why? But there's a Rabbids game, a port of Rayman 1, because of course there's a port of Rayman 1, a port of Rayman 3, and a port of Rayman 3. Has a similar subtitle, and actually, joke's on you, bitch, none of these games is what they seem. See, a rabbit game is a legit platformer. Yeah, take that, Crash and Spyro. It's pretty okay and plays and looks more or less the same as the Rayman 3 port, which is actually just Rayman 2 in 2D with bits of Rayman 1 and has nothing to do with Rayman 3 outside of its menu, and Rayman Hoodlum's Revenge is actually more like 3 aesthetically, but is otherwise its own whole game. Plays a lot like the Spyro games, funnily enough, and has similar issues like the camera sway and the occasionally fucky depth perception, but it is pretty good. The collectibles have super satisfying sounds when picked up, which makes it insta-rewarding. The music is really crisp for a GBA game and has this proggy, jazzy, fusion-y take on the typical Rayman soundscape. That adds a good driving pace to the game as a whole that's keeping up with its fast-paced movement and kinetic, jumpy combat. Thing is, as well, Rayman platformers are often a bit slow, more methodical or puzzle-focused or combat-heavy or just really precise and difficult, but this one is just jaunty. Murphy pulls up like, "Yo, bitch, it's a new adventure, how exciting," and then you simply bolt off to the nearest shiny thing and just go from there. It does do this annoying thing where it tilts the camera up when you jump, thus moving Rayman to the bottom of the screen and obfuscating his shadow of depth perception as a result, which makes that a bigger issue than it ever was for Spyro, and sometimes also the levels are really busy, which doesn't help with the former fuck shit, though for what it is, it's definitely pretty cool. I think if we can take away anything from all of this, though, is that when even the big major mascot franchises can come out with some hardcore, unadulterated, uncensored, experimental crust, and some legit good stuff too, in the form of some very mysterious Jogos, then fuck knows what else we'll find on our GBA journey. Bitch, I'm compressed. Got a low bit rate, but I'm not depressed. Fuck on your bitch, I don't need no backlight when she turn around. I see that back right. Yeah, ayy, crash your bear scar from the backseat, bitch, cause I'm a baby. Yeah, ayy, she wants to blow on the slot of the cartridge and I said maybe. Yeah, ayy, keep that shit perp, the moment is bruh. The car it goes skirt and I go raw. Back in the pieces of gun, that shit gold. Just like the sun, I'm brilliant, get told on. Cause you a bitch, that's the truth, there it is. Tiny little Minish, nothing but a devil kid. But hey, I got rubies in my mouth, that's a whole lot of red. And some gold like me out. Yeah, yeah, cause bitch I'm compressed. Got a low bit rate, but I'm not depressed. Damn, bitch I'm compressed. Got a low bit rate, but I'm not depressed. Nah, I'm not depressed. Goddamn, baby. Ooh, goddamn, baby. I am compressed, baby. I'm a tiny little man in a tiny little cartridge, baby. Yeah. I guess that's a song. Persona 5, the greatest RPG ever made. Japanese jazz music? Heh, more like Persona 5 music. Surely the GBA could produce nothing better. Oh shit, wait. They got Turf RPG? Dang. No one ever told me about Turf RPG. Yeah, that's right. They made a Harry Potter RPG. A JRPG, I guess. Like, it's not Japanese, but it's clearly inspired by what it's inspired by. They were on the Game Boy Color, too. I remember playing those and enjoying them for the most part, but this one looks nice, but otherwise is a bit lame, doesn't feel too well balanced with enemies up the ass and shit. Let's be real, Harry Potter's borderline late millennial cringe core, so fuck JK and fuck HP! We got bigger fish to fry, as the GBA had many JRPGs. Tons of Square stuff. And you know, I dig that Square stuff. Like, I'm not gonna talk about it here much, but I was tearing up at Tic Tacs because the goddamn music swells hard and the pixel art is beautiful and the, chain of memories exists. But really, it's probably everyone else repping that's way cooler, as you don't really get that much of anywhere else. Jack into your pet. Like, yeah, sure, you got the Mario RPG and that But what about Superstar Saga? It's the only one of those that spawned a consistent series, and for a pretty good fucking reason, because it basically does everything else that those game did about as well, sometimes worse, some things better, but Miyamoto didn't have a vendetta against it, so burr it goes. There are many other objects that you can jack in. Also, Medabots RPG. This shit's cute and neat and cute and fun and cute and colorful, and I like it. Just look at this little dude. If you've seen the show, it's basically the show but game. So, tiny town with tiny folk fighting their tiny mechs. Has a cool battle system that's like this surprisingly intricate combo of front mission and ATB. ATB in a way where it's visualized by way of literal wayward walking. Whoever gets to be on their spot first gets to attack or pick menu first, and set distances also play into damages and whatnot, and then you get the body parts a la front mission that work the same way with their own stats and attacks and other characteristics. And then of course you can have multiple bots, and it's not a fast battle system by any means, but it's really clever and good and great for a GBA game this cute, wholesome, and comfy. And hey, you know, it even has an auto battle option long before that became in vogue. A lot of its depth though comes from attacks all having their own walk speeds, if you will. You can pick your literal glass cannon back at base only to have it get dunked on your way there and reach the attack point not being able to do shit. But also, you can fire your big attack successfully but get booted on your way back because you built up so much walkages. But also, too, you can only use many attacks so many times anyway, so you don't want to waste them accidentally without having your fill fully potentialed. It's shit like that taken across multiple bots that adds a lot of thinking and engagement that just sort of makes it really fun to fuck with without it being too overwhelming too. Which I'd say goes for the game as a whole. It's surprisingly deep for what it is, while also at the same time being a pretty standard JRPG. It maximizes its spaces a lot, not burning through locales, characters, and areas like they don't mean nothing, while still having plenty to potentially burn through in the first place. And while you can customize your bot boys and get really in depth with it, you also don't get swamped with parts and overly complicated stat screens. I just really like its general structure, being that it's spaced and based like an anime, so every hour or so is like a new episode. 1 minute you're solving a mystery at school, and the next you're ghost hunting in the mountains. It's really cute. What does, sadly, drag the whole thing down quite significantly, even, is, as always, the random encounters that can be very unwelcome given that battles can range anywhere from 10 seconds to 10 fucking minutes or more due to the front mission limbs and the fact that parts can permanently break when you lose a fight, meaning that you can essentially fuck yourself over, ending up at a spot where winning becomes next to impossible, which is a bit rough and not really fun at all. Shame, because it has many cool systems, as I've said, but I'm not sure this really holds up that well aside from playing it in its intended setting, i.e. in the back of a car when you're 9. We'll say though that it is a great showcase of how the GBA's tech really worked in RPG's favor in general, not just to help along the grind, but also because JRPGs are very big games always. Lots of characters, models, or sprites and animations to work through, not to mention all of the head work needed to balance the math in the background. And so you can see how now with modern JRPGs, they either don't even try to be AAA or do and mostly fail, ending up unfinished or chopped up into bits as a result of all of the above. But luckily, on a system such as the GBA, where tilesets is tiny and text boxes are the norm, it's a fuck of a whole lot easier to squeeze out a ton of content to make a small-looking game that still feels big. With all of these tiny little interiors and one-off vignettes and events and tons of different battle animations and characters and things that you'd otherwise never see in what is essentially a licensed JRPG. Like, it is by no means an expensive game, but it sure as shit doesn't look cheap or low effort in any capacity, you know what I mean? So, hey, thanks, GBA. A security system designed to look like a doghouse. It will alert you of any intruders in the house. Looks like you can jack in here. And of course, there's also the Jacktastic Battle Network games, which so far are the only Mega Mans I have any experience with, but pretty good ones they are. Unlike Medabots, this is the rare type of JRPG that knows it's on a handheld and thus never wastes a minute, keeping shit brief and speedy, never deadlocking you into hour-long commitments and dialogue sequences, while still having plenty of personality to boot. Though, while all of these are cool and neat, I feel like if there's one game people think of when you say GBA RPG, or even just GBA in general, it's probably Isaac Got Nut. Yeah, so this game is a fucking classic. Camelot, leading up to this, was already making pretty well-regarded JRPGs for consoles nobody owned and therefore nobody bought. But if you look at their earlier titles, you can kind of begin to see how they were already on this tip. The art, the text, the music, the speedy, quick gameplay. Golden Sun defo feels like an amalgamation of what they had been doing. Ambitious as fuck too, has pre-rendered graphics, but not of the stanky kind at all, actually going for a more stylized, chunky, super deformed look, mixing it with simple but really cute pixel art and clever use of hues, transparencies, and gradients to make lighting. And during combat, there's even goddamn particle effects, which I don't even know what type of black magic they had to draw from to pull that off. The soundtrack by Motoi Sakuraba also pushes the sound chip to its limits, producing big, massive sounding prog that blasts through any and all downsides that the speaker may have had, and it keeps its menus and systems pretty simple and easy to read because of the small screen, which makes the game pretty smooth, and shit even goddamn spanned 2 whole cartridges technically, as they just had so much that they wanted to do and did. Sadly, the pacing is a bit off as a result, certainly on the proverbial disc 2, but you got variety in towns, dungeons, oh my god, it's just like Dark Souls! And other areas for days, and the map that, while pretty easy to get lost in, is also very fun to simply explore. Not to mention that much like a Dragon Quest game, each little town tells its own little story with its own little gimmicks in terms of gameplay via its cool magic system that also gives way to puzzles and adventure gamey shit, and yeah, it is just really, really goddamn motherfucking good. Built to work with the GBA's limitations whilst also shattering them, quite literally, as it poured out to multiple cartridges. I could honestly talk about this game for hours, and maybe one day I will. However, would you believe it that while this is Camelot's best game, it is not, certainly on the GBA, their most interesting one, as they also did this. Is me, bitch. So, for some reason, despite being exclusively known for JRPGs, Nintendo contracted Camelot to make the Mario tennis games. Like, all of them, too, except for the Virtual Boy one that was a Gunpei Yokoi joint. Which means that they could be responsible for the existence of Waluigi. Which, then, also means that Golden Sun is retroactively garbage, as Waluigi isn't in it as a cameo. Come time, come Game Boy, they come blasted a come-tastic come story on in there though, cause secretly they can't not come JRPG, and shit's cum laude too, mainly cause it is just Golden Sun but with tennis. Yeah, cause like, I mean, Golden Sun be like, and Mario Tennis be like, same game. You got some childs at a really fun and comfy looking tennis academy anyway, having a good time admiring the warp pipes and having a dance to the music, when suddenly it is revealed that there's a masked mystery person going about doing masked mystery person things, and so you have to work your way through the colorful cast of characters and beat them all at Tenethith to become the best there ever Denethith. And not gonna lie, I was not expecting the story to actually be anything, but it's basically a tennis anime. All the tropes are here. The hotheads, the girly girls, the dynamic duos, and the mystery peoples, and the goofy but kind adults, it's all there. For a JRPG as well that takes place in one town, it's defo a very cool one too. Has a lot more going on than what it really needed, and just indulges in fun explorable buildings and heaps of NPCs to chat to, no less lore to gain by way of Mario pictures in the headmaster's office, and the history of this academy that you can peel away at through awards and trophies and shit. I had like a whole 30 minutes of chatting, storying, and dicking around before I even came close to swinging a racket. Though, when I did, shit sure as shit owned just as well. It's pretty simple because JRPG, but it does a lot with what it has purely through how it handles, as it has a type of floatiness to the movement with a bit of momentum to it and grind that makes lining oneself up for ball hits just that smidge not fully in control-y enough to make even the minorest of ball flicks feel rewarding. Naturally, timing stuff, i.e. hitting a button when ball, is almost inherently satisfying, but it's when combined with the above and pretty decent sound effects that makes things Gucci. Then there's also RPG stats up the ass and big wins with every round, and they really just nailed the sensation of climbing the ranks. No less through how your exploits make the initially happy-go-fucky academy folks become saltier and saltier as time goes on. Not that there's any epic drama that results from all of this. The game keeps things lighthearted, and I do think that there's some untapped potential here, cause, well, the way that shit's set up makes the battles in general more personable. You ain't fighting against throwaway enemies over and over, you're fighting against characters with portraits and personalities and stories and motivations. Besides, just the idea of a tennis RPG is really cool. I have a bit of a fetish for games that ditch combat in favor of other cool stuff, as that instantly opens up the door to not only gameplay innovations, but also tons of stories you otherwise couldn't really tell quite as well. Many publishers obviously wouldn't take that risk, as violence is simply what sells most and probably always will, but on the GBA with low-ass production costs and the Golden Sun engine and assets that they could reuse, this becomes more justifiable. So, hey, again, thanks, GBA. As Mario Tennis is as cute as it is as fun, and as experimental as it is expertly crafted. Though, yeah, more could have definitely been done with this type of story idea, and I'm very sad that, far as I know, Camelot never really got to. They made more tennis and golf games, sure, but those remained largely storyless. There's the indie game Golf Story, which might do what I'm looking for, but I haven't played it yet. And as far as other cool castle games go, the GBA also has Shining Soul, which is based on a long-running Camelot series, only this one is not made by them, but instead by motherfucking Grasshopper. Spearheaded by Akira Ueda, aka The Contact Man, aka Mr. X Love the Lick, and motherfucking Masafumi Takada on the OST. Also, check this fucking presentation. It really looks a lot like Contact 2. It's defo more of a Grasshopper game because, like, the text sounds. And just the general casual vibe being really strange and different from what a game that looks like this would normally have. Though it plays like quite a standard action RPG. Slice sword, kill slime, get point. It is what it is, but it is pretty fun. You can, like, get hit while you're in menus. It's just like... Anyway, I compared Mario Tennis Power Tour to an anime, and that's really because it's basically one giant tournament arc. It has the epic team-ups and rivalries, people along the sidelines discussing shit, little mysteries and drama shit talks around and in between the matches. And, you know what's also almost always like one giant tournament arc, even when it's not literally one clever segue question mark? Dragon Ball Z! That's a series that also has a ton of RPGs in it, some very particularly good ones on the GB of A. Y'all know it, I know it, Goku know it. It's Legacy of Goku 2 and Legacy of Goku 1. The latter being quite a good example of GBA's skungitude, as the whole game could essentially be described as... Combat's kinda shitty because attack ranges are iffy and walk speeds is stiffy and the AI is dumb as fuck and everyone sorta walks about and stun locks each other and it's all just wee one-off punches as well. Like, this does not capture the intensity of the show at all, but it does lay down a chill vibe and also some really solid foundations. Top-down action, exploration of Dragon Ball's adorable world, a fair bit of hangout ability, just chilling with the cast. Cool little RPG stats that don't just involve combat, but also dicking aroundy bits, like the first level that you gain from collecting porn, and there's some cute side quests. If this game would have been better combat and pacing wise and was less grindy, it easily coulda, woulda, and had done been something really great. By Goku. And luckily, Legacy of Goku 2 was. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do like how scungy the first game was, but right away, this just looks and feels so much better. The UI design isn't as Babby's first text box anymore. There's no weird perspective fuckery like whatever the fuck this shit is. And it has more of a legit presentation with music scoring and nice pixel arty bits rather than crusty ass screenshots of the show. And hey, it even plays pretty well. Has less dumpy animations, walk speeds is boosted considerably, the sound effects for moves are good, like key blasts actually connect now. And you don't have a range as stubby as your tiny little chibi hands would imply, as basic attacks have a slight lunging property to them now. And of course, it also just has much more exploration. Right away, you get to dick around in Goku's little house and be like, whoa! Goku has an alarm clock! You got this whole little Mode 7 world map with tons of places to go, optional or otherwise, and entire cities and shit with a bunch of enterable buildings and folks to talk to. It's like such a whole game-ass game now, and exactly the type of stuff that I want out of a Dragon Ball Z RPG, honestly. Like in one, you awkwardly fight Raditz yelling, "Help! Piccolo! Help!" They just sort of like does brain-dead pathfinding, and here you get with the whole gang and their scripted events. There's real-ass cutscenes, real-ass storytelling, real-ass atmosphere, and real-ass gameplay. And all that from what was, more or less, a bargain bin shovelware studio. Fucking Webfoot Technologies is and was and are, as their name and logo would suggest, not exactly the coolest studio. Making pinball games and MLP games and Hello Kitty games and fancy nancy tea party time. So the fact that they were able to squeeze out a game this good is really quite something. And of course, they followed it up later that same year with the even better Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu. Upon its release, Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu was met with generally unfavorable reviews from critics. And you know what? I really wonder why, cause ain't gonna lie, this is great. Just look at it. It's beautiful. It is, dare I say, peak GBA. We got the pre-renders that don't scale or compress well or belong together cause I think they were supposed to be used for a 3D game that never got made. We got the scungiest sound effects. Like, what? And somehow it's running in the Legacy of Goku engine, as I guess that's just what they had, and I doubt they had much time or money to make this, but it certainly explains why it is the stiffiest, jankiest, garboest feeling fighter this side of Battle Arena Toshinden or Final Bout. Granted, to be fair, it is on the GBA, which wasn't exactly a fighting game beast, but then it also has Tekken Advance, which is really goddamn good and feels and sounds great. I think just making a fighting game in an RPG engine is simply a case of ramming a round peg into a square hole, as said square hole proved the inverse with Tobal's RPG mode in a fighter's engine just as well. Still, A for A, though, as I'm glad that it exists. Either way, I feel like this is a pretty good place to wrap up our RPG segment, as I think now might be a good time to put some focus on that there sound chip. Bruh. Whoa, look at this. It's a tape. Many tapes of Positive Yellow. That one album I did that y'all like so much. I mean, because it's pretty good. I like it. But yeah, me and the homie Hazel and her label, Pop Spirit, teamed up to drop Spirit. There's like 100 or so of them right now. You can buy them with money. They're yellow, they're positive, there's a car. Whoa, look at it go. Animated by Nailgun, who is good. It's all pretty great, really. Positive Yellow DX with 4 bonus tracks. Buy it now on the Pop Spirit Bandcamp. Boom.
He's finally back to suck yo dick, crash yo car, and then steal yo bitch. DK. Donkey Kong is here, bitch, it's time to admit it. You wanna fuck funky, get him hard and then nut in that monkey. DK. Donkey Kong is
Yeah, so Donk has had some pretty iconic tunes for real. This is one of them. Then there's also the Wave Station, as fuck soundtrack for the Country series, and of course, the GBA game. All the atmosphere, the lush sounds, the tension fucking destroyed by a harsh MIDI pan flute. In a similar vein, there's the Rayman 1 music, which replaces most of the really well-picked, smooth, nice-sounding instruments with also the skungiest, harshest flute sound. However, while these examples exist due to the devs either not knowing how to work with the quirks and limitations of the sound chip or simply didn't have the time to figure things out, these exact limitations also made for some really interesting sounding stuff. For example, check out this Barbie game, bro. Believe it or not, Aphex Twin did not compose this, and who did wasn't credited. They did credit the 5-year-old who QA tested this though, so that's cool, but I couldn't really find out much else online either, which sucks, as I want to know how this happened. If I had to hazard a guess, I guess they probably just didn't give much of a fuck and simply let the composer do whatever, which normally results in lazy sample pack usage or very standard template melodies, but they clearly got creative with it to the benefit of me who likes this very much. The whole game feels like a dream. This song plays during the menus, gameplay, the credits, it's just there. Meanwhile, the title screen with its freakishly realistic horse contrasted to the fast-moving clouds, skunk trees, and music that's all is also quite something. This game's music got some real clever compression usage, with the atmospheric hazes in the background barely being identifiable as any instrument, just adding a nice texture. All the bells and round sine waves cut through the haze at their peak, echoing out in a malaise of compression as they fade. Everything comes together to sound like something that has reverb on it and is really clear and roomy, but is, in actuality, just a bunch of noisy, high-pitched sounds. A lot of great texture going on here, for real. Something similar was also done for Silent Hill Play Novel, where an equally uncredited composer used different bell chimes but spaced out to fuck, letting their cold, compressed crunchiness bellow out through the town with its slowly breathing, pulsating fog layers. if you simply want an example of the sound chip being used to its fullest by big pros, peep this shit. Using samples and MIDI sparingly, thus allowing for slightly less crust and vocals sung in a high pitch with simple little sound canvas plucks, thus also vibing very well with the speaker's output. It's fucking genius. As is this game overall, really. Wario Land 4 owns. It has style for days, cutscenes aplenty, and gameplay that's super satisfying with everything being so weighty and thick and collectibles being shiny and fun to get. But yeah, sound chip. A lot of music made for it, including Wario Land 4, uses this wheel old thing that I just mentioned called the Roland Sound Canvas. A machine that has a library of very punchy, no frills, almost sort of basic, but nonetheless recognizable set of instruments. It sounds like video games, and the prime reason for that is that because of its simple soundingness, it's very good for heavily compressed audio, as video games, certainly on the GBA, would often have due to bit rates. Anything more complex would go on to sound too muddy or shitty when overly bitted, but the RSC survives that transition gracefully. I mean, just listen to the song you've been hearing. How nice these basic bitch guitar plucks sound when compressed to shit. That is some good texture right there. It's used very heavily anyway in anything from Smash Bros. Melee, Twilight Princess, and Yoshi Island to Live Alive, Phoenix Wright, and fucking Sonic 06, even seeing frequent use to this very day. A few notables for the GBA though would include Mario Kart and its fat bass slaps, Advance Wars and its donkin timpanis, Golden Sun and its crazy proc synths, and of course Pokemon Gen 3. People sometimes make fun of the Ruben Saf music for being too horny, but those blasty, powerful, cheerful little trumpets were also chosen to accommodate the speaker. Meanwhile, the bass and percussion contain a lot of timpani too, which not only fits with the epic orchestrated soundscapes, but is also a lower frequency instrument that's still audible when heavily compressed and rung through a fucking tin can. And the same goes for the 8-bit dude bass and marching drums and hi-hats made from white noise and waves gen by the chiptune chip. Besides, it's a unique soundscape that gives the games their own identity even without the limitations. Pikachu. Pikachu, no. Pikachu, no! I swear, if it wasn't for the 8-bit bass and not actually using any drum break samples, I would have picked this as a PS1 game song. As aside from the snare and the Hoover synth pad, none of this is samples. And so, those samples, like the Hoover pad, could sound super clear and airy and not muddy at all, as the rest of the little bleeps and twinkles and hi-hats are generated by the chiptune chip. It's super clever, sounds great, legit, not even by GBA compression standards, and also fits very well with Battle Network, as it's all about techno PC shit. And you know when shit goes techno PC shit, you gotta have them bleeps. Even Sonic Battle's migraine-inducing ass knew that. In any case, many of these tracks were made with compression in mind, or simply benefited from it either way, as even the shitty donk MIDI music has its charms about it, not gonna lie. However, as I was writing this, I've been seeing a lot of restoration thingies going around, aka folks doing more or less what I just did with the canvas, but much better and deeper for various SNES and GBA games, and it's super neat, as you get a sort of view of how these songs would have sounded to the composers while making them before being MIDI'd and sampled the sound chip, and you can also get a better understanding of how texture works and what kind of instruments, sound backs, and sample CDs people would have used back then. I did, sadly, also see some fun policing country going on about it too, to which I'ma say, don't gatekeep. Ain't nothing wrong about folks having fun with some sound sources and learning about their favorite games, especially when your whole work depends on the work of others. That maybe don't go after the kids with the Roland sound sample CDs, Jesus. Because that's a cop move. And don't be a cop. But yeah, it's cool to see sounds like warped by hardware and then artists using that to make those sounds sound cooler. Bad sound chips and speakers, records and tapes, various types of recording equipment, it can all be vibes, and I do like vibes. Vibes are not cop shit. Forever stranded, always impressed. That's right, bitches. Secret retrospective episode. Fuck you! As Konami's output on the GBA was actually pretty great. There's the excellent Silent Hill play novel, the cool Castlevanias, a shit ton of Yu-Gi-Ohs, and the amazingly fun Konami Crazy Racers. Konami Man, though, didn't just send out a letter to the racers, but also to Hideo and his Gulak Goon Gang. Emphasis on the latter, as, well, Hideo often gets all the credit for Boktai. He really only produced it as it was actually designed, directed, and written by Ikuya Nakamura. As far as I can tell, dude got his start assigning when Controller Rumble in MGS1 and doing 3D modeling and design, but soon went on to take up even more roles during Ghost Babel and MGS2's development, doing many things on many Metal Gears all the way up to Survive and wholesale directing the surprisingly really fun Metal Gear Touch. So a bit of a jack of all trades, pretty much, doing everything from directing and writing to doing sprite work, 3D modeling, and even concept art. And so, much like the other Hideo Jack underlings such as Shinta Nojiri and Noriaki Okamura, Nakamura too got to have his own pet project, overseen by Kojima and sorta owned the studio, but really that could mean as much as that he simply walked into the room a few times, smiled and gave a thumbs up. In this case though, I think it extends to coming up with the base idea for the game's main gimmick, which is the sun. Not that we'll be seeing that here as I'm emulating, and it's currently not summer and also a pandemic, so what we're left with is a pretty neat little stealth game. The idea was that vampires and shit don't like the sun, and so you'd have to play in the sun to charge your gun with sun to take him down, or either get shaded and nighted on and sneak around. As you can tell from my footage, I defo got nighted on a bit, and it's really neat to see that reflected in the game. Seeing it actually spitting the legit time until sunrise right back at me and giving me a little bit of shit for it as there was loads I couldn't do. But, of course, you can change the time, and so I did, and hey, now I can charge my gun. It's really neat though, the whole mode of gameplay sort of changes depending on when you play. It's more shooty during the day and easier as an effect, but more low-key, quiet, and tense as night. 2 games in 1. Daytimes as difficulties. It's super unique. You can also store sunlight either by using it conservatively or dumping it into stations so you can plan out your night sessions, and there's even cool little MGS-like wall leads and shit, and the types of enemies differ very wildly depending on the time of day too. It's defo taken both styles into consideration more than I figured it would. Either way though, in both cases, it's a weirdly simplistic sort of game. As a shooty game, you get different gun frames, i.e. shot types, but you're still just mostly running, gunning, or stunning dudes and dashing past them, and as a stealth game, it uses Snake Man's guard mans on the level of, I'd say about Metal Gear 2. Rather basic patterns, clearly defined hiding spots, square geometry, It's a bit slow, maybe even too slow at times, but the presentation definitely makes it work regardless, as it has really great sneaky snooping around music and rather satisfying sound effects and animations, even if the navigation can feel a bit awkward at times due to the GBA as fuck isometric perspective. You play as Django, the son of a cool vampire hunter guy who is also a cool vampire hunter guy tasked with going into vampire dungeon castle mansions to hunt vampires and retrieve goodies and vampires. It has a lot of cool lore and ideas and terms that I'm sure get explored more bigly over the course of the series, but here it really just boils down to navigate, stealth / shoot maze, and drag back the coffin to the circle place outside. It's a really fun game loop that gives the simple base mechanics a lot more depth as A, coffin get mad and will drag itself back if you leave it behind for too long, and B, it makes you see the level you just blasted on through in a wholly different sunlight. Certain enemy patterns, easy to deal with when moving forward, might very much come back to bite you in the ass on your tread back, not to mention that you can't exactly move very fast while dragging. It's a really basic concept, again, but similar to Metal Gear games, I guess, that simplicity gets used in many different situations and exhausted as much as it can be. I mean, while it lacks MGS's grand set pieces, it instead focuses on scope. Big, maze-like dungeons underground with tactically placed recharge points, aka cracks where the sun bleeds through, provided that you're catching any at all, and Metroidvania-esque progressions with keys and stuff. Kinda like if the MGS VR missions were one big continuous gauntlet of things, affected by all of the many variables listed above and being more interconnected than really any of the Guardmanzy MGS games due to the coffin backtracks. It is generally a really cool game that, while clearly being made by Metal Gear veterans, isn't quite as, tainted by the many Kojima-isms. And don't get me wrong, I loves me some Kojima-isms, and this game does have whole voice acting and shit.
In a place not too far from here and now.
But it's never sleazy or icky, nor does it have huge story aspirations, and remains just a very GBA-ass game. Simple, arcadey, addictive, makes great use of it being a handheld, and somehow doesn't even look or sound too scungy. So, good job, Gulags.
Solar Nut!
Now, there's a lot to be said about Kojima's influence on Zone of the Enders 1 or 2, but I'll do that when I'll eventually get back to those games again. For now though, it's good to know that Konami Man also requested a rare unknown third Zoe game made for the GBA. And with this one, Kojima doesn't even have a producing role. Hell, it don't even have the potential actual brains behind the Zoe series Noriaki Okamura behind it, as its development was outsourced primarily to Winky Soft. I'm gonna be real, that name does not inspire confidence, though they've made a lot of those Robot Wars games, so it can't be too bad, right? I mean, just looking at Zone of the Enders, The Fist of Mars, God, what a title. Alone, it certainly looks pretty strong, has a cool green UI, a pounding techno soundtrack, yeah. Really cool robo animations and hours of VN cutscenes for days with some really nice CG pre-renders that give off some powerful Front Mission 3 vibes and gameplay of the Super Robot Wars variety. I think that's what Wikipedia says it has, though I wouldn't really know. I don't think I can understate how much this game's story presentation fucks. It's like a mix between, again, Front Mission 3 and Police Knots. Chill bits, cool frames, nice text boxes, very nicely but slowly paced talking, and cool establishing shots and sound effects, all coinciding to make these VN scenes flourish with cinematic flair inside of your head. And they tell a story not of Leo or Egyptian stuff, but instead of some kid called Cage Midwell, a cleaner bust boy bitch on a spaceship that suddenly explodes as he escapes in a mech with some mystery chick, and then crazy international conflict starts happening with them in the middle of all of it. And bitch, let me tell ya, it has some GBA-esque writing to go along with all of that. Boktai had it too, Mario Tennis had it, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance has it, the Legacy of Goku games do too. It's some shit I've only hinted at prior up until now, but it's good to point out here now, given that this X has very much the aesthetics of its slower-paced peers, but still cuts through the bullshit to not waste your time for handheld purposes. Information is conveyed very quickly, like, hey, what's going on? Ellipses. Oh, you can't remember, can you? Yeah. Okay. It conveys the JRPG information, but much faster than most JRPGs would. It can feel sort of clunky, for sure, but it has some purpose to it too, as to keep up an action game-like pace, giving it the comfy benefits of Police Knots without any of the super waffly Kojima downsides. It's the other sides of Boktai's coin in that sense. I suppose it do considerably lower the stakes. Best friend is like, LOL, I'm your best friend, and then 2 minutes later he dies, and then 5 minutes later he's back, and it's all too quick to really feel anything for anything, but it does not work neither in that dumb action game anime plot way, which is mostly what it is too. Boasting a big old colorful cast of comic reliefs, cockies, and dum-dums, where events might not be as weighty, but they are very plenty. It's just fun, really. Good, exciting fun. Which I'll say about the gameplay just as well. Battle system is standard tic-tacs fare in many senses if it wasn't for the interactive attacks, where you need to aim or dodge stats. It sort of simplifies tactics combat in the same way that the PS2 games simplified action combat. Those games were very basic, but looked cool and felt good, and also had a lot else going on, and so it worked out. Here, it lacks a lot of the typical tactical tropicals. There's no bullshit with sides and complicated turns and speed stats, no elements, no rock, papers, or scissors, and not a whole lot of number crunching going on either, nor jobs. It's just cool robots with guns and shit. But because of the fast little mini-game that is each attack, and the general fast-pacedness of the game in generally, it also all checks out, as the ability to aim good adds a nice sensation of skill and makes things more engaging and hands-on. Plus, the fact that you're in charge of when you hit and miss negates the randomness that can often make these types of games feel very unfair, and it has a nice cursor feel with physics and a bit of heft, while also being blazingly quick, much like how the Zoe Mex was for an action game. I'd be remissing out on dope stuff though if I didn't also mention how legit excellent the soundtrack is. Uses the general sparse yet texture-rich punchiness of jungle and breakbeat to its advantage to make, well, jungle and breakbeat. Drum breaks is often muddy to begin with, so the little snippets of those sound great when sampled up through the sound chip, and alongside it we got buckets of 8-bit percussion for the rattling hi-hats cutting above the mix, and the melodies are all jazzy and roadsy and patty, so those also play very nicely with the compression and the hissing. Dunno if the deep basses will come through on the speaker, but my emulating ass sure should appreciate those. Either way, it does a great job of maximizing the action tension and glorifying its cool green menus, while at the same time it does what many GBA games do and lets those warm, fuzzy strings swell, amplifying the chill, friend, homie, pre-render vibes, thus rounding this comfy little game off perfectly. It is so good that I'ma just let it fade out. So this is a thing that happened. GTA on the GBA, or rather, it is its own game, a mostly okay one even. Runs at like 12 FPS, but the graphics is nice, and the gameplay of the 2D GTAs is translated pretty well, though, I mean, you know, those games weren't always the greatest, certainly on a combat front, and that's all here too. But the name, logo, and general stylistic choices made do make it look like a port in screenshots and articles, which was surprisingly very common on the GBA. It had many ports on there, especially SNES games, which I would play this way. It's not like I'm old enough to have grown up with one of those things, so burr, Luigi, go. But on the other hand, most console and PC games of the time simply couldn't be ported, and as Donk showed, even old games could be tricky, as even more powerful hardware is still different hardware. So I can get why many ports that weren't really ports existed. It's just that one also really has to question the choice to port Medal of Honor Underground to the GBA, because that is some crust right there. Some real stank. It looks like oatmeal. The music is... well, it's trying to do something, but it ain't doing it. And staggeringly, it's even slightly less playable than GTA Advance was, so... good job, EA. Seeing full 3D games on the GBA was always pretty odd though, wasn't it? Because they barely look good. Asterix and Obelix manages it, sure, but that's far too Euro for my majority Anglo-ass audience to handle and is also Uncle Derek's territory. But for something so seemingly ambitious and tricky to do, 3D was surprisingly common among the bottom barrel bargain bin port type games. However, what wasn't very common were the few games with straight-up FMVs. As stated prior, GBA games rely a lot on CG pre-renders and static text boxes, which ain't that far off from FMV games per se, but obviously these cartridges weren't meant to hold shit like that. They were meant to hold Pokemon Aria.
Don't tell Nintendo I own this. It's illegal contraband shit.
But Big Money Square managed it with Chain of Memories. The Legacy of Goku games have the scungiest version of the Dragon Ball Z intro. Silent Hill Play Novel has what looks to be the opening FMV wholly intact, only for it to then quite hilariously give up after 5 seconds, but you know, it's cool. FMV was possible. Which I guess ain't too surprising given that those GBA video things existed, but it's still something you rarely ever saw and for good reason. And so, of course, we had to port a game that's entirely made up out of highly detailed, hand-drawn FMV animation. Look at it! Oh my god! Look at it! It looks great! Yeah, Broken Sword, the Shadow of the Templars, is pretty much entirely crust. Not as crust as Medal of Honor was, but definitely quite high on crust. As the crust here even extends to the box art. Which is really the only reason why I brought it up. See, while the GBA has no shortage of great box arts, it being a shabby port and licensed game dump garbo station also meant that we saw some dandy ass shit. Like Super Duper Sumos, Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure, board game classics, Sims, Bust a Nut, Turf, the Quidditch Snitch, and of course, the one you've all been waiting for, Carnage Rally! Yeah, that's right, we got the face, we got the blurry car, we got the carnage, and we got the... Yo, the game actually just looks like this. Yeah, this whole time, the art was just an accurate depiction of what you were buying. An actually pretty fun top-down racer. Nothing special, unassuming. Pure adult baby with dreadlocks. Which is probably a good enough place to end things, I think, as when even Carnage is honestly pretty good, I think we can all agree that the GBA in general was honestly pretty good. Yes, we got the skung, we got the crust, and we got a whole bunch of mysterious games, but god damn it if that wasn't ever part of its charm neither. Not to mention all of the bona fide classics that I played for this. I ran through a good 51 games for this bitch and had much fun doing just that. Sure, maybe the DS would be better. Sure, maybe the OG is more iconic, but fuck it, man. Neither of those have Shark Tale. So I rest my case and rest my GBA. Although, Nintendo did do this to my ears. Fuck the GBA.